Hey guys, I'm Jordan and you're watching Fixbook. After watching this video, your car problems stand about as much a chance as this laptop does against my hot lead. Now, make sure you stay tuned so you can see what happened to the laptop at the end of this video. And as always, don't forget to subscribe, like, and leave a comment down below. So today, I'm going to show you how to replace the front brake pads and rotors on your Chevrolet Lumina. Okay guys, now the first thing we're going to want to do is go ahead and lift up your car. You'll find there's a place for your jack right underneath there. Just go ahead and lift up there, and then you also want to use a jack stand. You can place your jack stand under the lower control arm, somewhere right underneath there. Find a good body piece and just kind of put your jack stand there. And then we've got to remove our wheel, and we got 19mm lug nuts we have to remove. So I'll go ahead and take that off, and we'll take a look at those brakes. Alright guys, and when it comes to taking these lug nuts off, you may have some of these little caps. The car I'm working on only have one of them, and it just covers up your lug nut. Then I'll go ahead and remove the rest of my lug nuts here. Okay guys, and the next thing we have to do here is we've got two 15mm bolts, one sitting right there and one sitting right down here. You gotta break those loose and remove those. I'm gonna go ahead and just grab my little auto removing tool here and get these guys off. And there we go. Now we'll go ahead and remove our two caliper bolts there. Get that guy off and that guy down off there. And next we'll take a screwdriver. We're going to loosen up this caliper so we can remove our caliper. Alright, so here I'm just going to take my screwdriver, my big flathead screwdriver. I'm just going to reach back in here and just kind of pry. And what I'm doing there is I'm compressing my caliper pistons, and basically, I already did this before I took those two bolts off. You can actually do this step before you take the bolts out, and we should be able to just take this guy right off here. And look at that, our caliper is our bracket is, well, no it's not, but the pads are sitting right in there. So next I'll show you how to remove those pads, and we'll take a look at our rotor too. Alright guys, now when it comes to removing our pads, basically what we've got here is this one just kind of pops out, and our pads are looking real good. So I'm gonna set mine back in here after a second, and then we've got this difficult little guy we're gonna have to pry out. Alright, so once you grab your flathead screwdriver, what we're gonna do is we're just gonna reach down in here, and we're gonna kind of turn and pull up, and we're gonna have to work both sides here. I'm gonna come over to my other side here and do the same thing. I'm gonna pull up on them, and hopefully, ideally what we're going to do is we're going to get both sides up, and then we'll pull up around our piece here. Alright, I got that side, then I'll come back over to this side and do the same thing, and there we go. Once you do that, you'll be able to pull your pad out. So that's what we're going to do as far as getting our pads off. Now, what we've got to do is we've got to send both these pistons back home. So when you go to put your new brake pads back in, you're going to be able to fit this caliper with the pads in there over your rotor. Okay guys, and before I show you how to send those pistons home, I'm going to go ahead and talk to you here about your rotor here for just a second. So listen up, and then I'll show you how to measure them. Alright, we have now reached the most important segment of this video. Please do not skip over this part of the video. It's important for you to hear what I've got to say about rotors, and it's important to assure that after you've done your brake repair, your car will be safe to drive. So we've got a few different options here when it comes to dealing with your rotors. You can either replace your rotor, have your rotor resurfaced, or you can keep and use your current rotor as is. Now, first I'm going to go over replacing the rotor. It is an absolute must to replace the rotor if its measurement is below the minimum thickness threshold to ensure your car is safe to drive. What I'm going to describe here in just a second, whether you want or don't want to replace the rotor, that's up to you. Affordability and comfort is at hand. But if it is below the minimum thickness threshold, there's no other way about it. You must replace the rotor. Okay, so now that we understand that, and here in just a second I'll show you how to measure it and be able to tell whether it's below the threshold or not. But now we're going to talk about turning your rotors. Now, there's a couple reasons you could turn your rotor, and that's to keep your present rotor, and you can pay about $10 to Napa or O'Reilly, where they have a brake lathe, and they will turn your rotor for you. It's a cheaper option than buying a whole new rotor. And the reason you'd want to do that is if you've wore your brake pads down metal to metal, and the metal pad is wedged in grooves there, and it's all torn up, then you don't want to put new pads on that torn up surface with your old rotor. So you'd want to have your rotor resurfaced, and that's to ensure longevity for your new brake pads. The other reason to have your rotors resurfaced at a parts store is if you're having vibration problems with your rotors. That is, if you're driving down the highway and you apply the brake pedal and you feel your brake pedal vibrating. If you don't like that, that would be a good reason to have your rotors turned. But if you're really particular, just keep in mind that when the rotors are thinner, they're more likely to develop that warpage problem, because what happens is you'll be driving down the road, you'll run through a big puddle of water, and the water will splash on the hot rotor and it'll warp the rotor. The thicker the rotor is, or the newer the rotor is, it's going to be less likely to develop this problem. So resurfacing the rotor, if you have that problem, will fix the problem, but it'll come back faster. So if you have the extra money and you really don't want that problem, you can go ahead and just throw money at it and just get a new rotor every time. But if you want to see the problem go away and risk it coming back or not, it may or may not come back, you can go ahead and turn it and get out of the situation cheaper and be more comfortable. Now the last option is to just keep your rotor and put new brake pads on. That is a very acceptable option, and that's what I do about 80% of the time. Again, as long as the rotor is above the minimum threshold, because if it's not going to be safe to drive. So it's okay to put new pads on your old rotor if it's smooth like this you can see right here. As long as it's a semi-smooth surface, you can go ahead and put the new brake pads on. It's really fine. So those are the three options that you have: replacing, resurfacing, or just keeping your old one. And again, most of the time, most people are just fine keeping their old rotor and putting new pads on top of their old rotor. One more thing I almost forgot to is rotors that cause vibration, they're safe to drive. It's just an uncomfortable thing. The unsafe thing is the below the minimum thickness, but rotors that cause vibration are safe to drive. And also, this minimum thickness number, if I don't tell you exactly what the number is here in just a second, you can find it at your parts store. They'll give you a discard thickness number on your rotor, so keep that in mind too. Alright guys, and the minimum thickness measurement I found for this rotor is 24.68 millimeters. Again, just double check that because that's what I found on the internet. And this one's measuring at somewhere around 26.3 in that range, so that's going to be well above the minimum thickness number. So the customer didn't complain about pulsating or anything like that, warped rotors. So this rotor is going to be just fine. But next I'll show you how to remove this guy in case you need to replace your rotor. Okay guys, now to remove this rotor, it's really simple. We just have two fasteners. There's one right here and right here. And to remove these fasteners, you need star point sockets. They're gonna look like this right here. And unfortunately, this is the largest star point socket I have. It's a T55 and it just barely fits in there. So you're gonna need something larger than a T55. I'm assuming like a T60 or a T65 is what you're gonna need in order to remove this fastener. So you'll remove these two fasteners and this bracket just comes right off. And guys, don't be afraid of it, it goes right back on. And it's basically, these are basically long bolts. And I won't be able to show you physically, but I can show you as soon as you get this bracket off. You're just gonna grab both ends and this will pull right off. You can see I can almost get this guy out from around the bracket just by doing this. So it's as simple as that. You just remove this bracket and then you'll be able to pull this guy right off. And again, a T60 or T65 star point socket will remove these two guys right here. So that's how you do it. Then you just slip your new rotor back on. Make sure to take some brake cleaner and wipe down your new rotor. That just kind of helps things. It helps produce less smoke when the job's all said and done. So with all that said, we'll go ahead and look at reinstalling our brake pads. Okay guys, so the next thing we're going to do is I'm going to show you how to compress back these pistons. You have to send these guys home in order to put your new brake pads on. So you'll take your old brake pad. In my case, this is the pad we're going to reuse because it's not down too bad. So you're gonna install them like that. Then you're gonna take a big C-clamp that looks something like this, and we're gonna come back, we're gonna swirl them back there until we can get them in such a position here. Then we're gonna go ahead and tighten this guy up, and what that's gonna do when we slowly compress it, we're gonna go at about this rate right here, just nice and slow because we don't want to damage anything. But what that's going to do is it's going to slowly compress these two pistons, and that's how you'll go about compressing your pistons. It's as simple as that. So once you've got these guys flush, we'll go ahead and get your new brake pads. And also the other thing you want to do here is you'll apply disc brake grease or lubrication to the ends of these guys right here. I'll apply it right there and right there, and that's going to ensure smooth brake operation. And we'll also want to check our slide pins if we have slide pins, and it doesn't look like we, oh yeah, our slide pins are actually the bolts that go on there. So just make sure when we get it back on there, those look nice and lubed up, and mine looks lubed up when I took them off. They're sitting right over here. So this is going to operate as your slide pin, and this one looks in pretty good condition, but also you can apply disc brake grease along here as well. So now I'll go ahead and get my pads set back up. I'll show you how to do that, and we'll keep on moving. Okay guys, so now we're gonna get our pads and we're gonna set them up here. I've got both the pads, and the one with the wear indicator is gonna be on this side, and the one without the wear indicator is gonna be on the inside. So basically, you'll take your new pad and just kind of snap them back into place like I just did. Now, if you have brand new ones, it may be a lot more difficult than that. So what you can do is you can take some pliers, and you can, if you see these guys right here, you can kind of squeeze down on them and bend that metal, and it'll make it a bit easier. It's not gonna hurt it, I promise you. It'll be all right. And I'll just snap them back on there. And then for this one, you may have to do the same thing, just kind of bend this metal, because again, it may be near impossible. But we're gonna just put this guy back on, and I'll snap back down in there just like that. So that's gonna be fine for us. And just kind of make sure it's pretty close to in the middle. I can actually see on mine where mine was sitting. Well, it looks like I can. So it looks like it kind of rocks back and forth because I can see wear on the metal backing plate there. So now we're just gonna get this guy arranged. Oh, we're gonna drop him, that's no good, but that'll be all right. And we're gonna set them right back here on our thing. And we're allowed to do that because the piston is compressed in such a way that it's gonna allow us to do that. And then let me make sure you can see exactly what I'm doing here. Make sure when you get this caliper with your brake pads back on, these little rubber pieces are lined up. If not, you're not going to be able to stick your bolts back in, your sliding pin bolts. So go ahead and just kind of wipe these guys off, make sure they have lubrication, and I'm just going to work them on in there. And then I'm going to start them, and I'm going to run them down, and we're almost home free, guys, so just hang on tight, and I'll show you more here in just a second. Alright, so now I'm just going to run these guys down. Just like that. And like that. And we can see when I did that, it kind of made this thing go all funky. We want to make sure our rubber seal is doing just that, sealing. So if you have to work this guy around just like that and get him worked back so he's sealing and not moved how it was before. So there we go. Now I'm just going to take my regular ratchet and I'm going to make sure these guys are nice and snugged really well. We don't want them coming loose while we're driving down the road. There we go. Got that one snugged, and there we go. I got that one snugged. Now we can see our caliper is a little bit loose here. That's because, well, for one, we don't have the wheel hooked back up, and if we did, it would look more like that because the lug nuts are going to be holding this rotor down because it's going to be holding the wheels of the car. But we can see it's still kind of shaky here. That's because when you get back in the car, once you've got your wheel back on, what you need to do is depress your brake pedal, and that's going to push these pistons back out to compress the brake pads up against the rotor, and you need that to have braking force. If you don't do that step, then when you get in the car and put it in reverse or forward and you gotta hit your brakes, you're not gonna stop and you're gonna hit whatever in front of you or behind you. So remember, make sure to do this crucial step. When you get in the car for the first time after doing your brakes, you need to depress the brake pedal all the way down to the floor, pump it up until it gets good and hard. If you don't do that step again, like I said, you're not gonna be stopping the first time you go to hit your brake pedal. So also, one more thing, I'm going to skip this showing me putting the wheel back on and all that because it's pretty self-explanatory. Just it's the same as you saw me take it off there, but The other thing you want to remember is if this is your first time doing a brake job, a lot of times you get grease and stuff on these rotors from touching them, and if you didn't wipe it down good, it's really not going to hurt the brakes too much. But what you'll see is after you've driven for the first time, you may get some kind of a smell, and you may see smoke rolling off your wheels, and that's just because there's grease and that stuff's burning off. So once it's all burned off, it won't happen about after the first time you've driven, so just keep that in mind. So that pretty much concludes today's project. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching, guys, and don't forget to subscribe so you can catch all my new videos, which publish Mondays and Fridays at 9 a.m. Pacific Time, 10 a.m. Mountain Time, 11 a.m. Central Time, 12 p.m. Eastern Time, and I will see you then.